Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles. In this episode, number 5, I believe, we're trying something a little bit different. We'll be discussing some of our recent movie watches in a more casual approach than we have with our episodes dedicated to specific movies. We do get into some light spoilers for a few of the entries here, specifically in this episode about New Mutants, Alita Battle Angel, and Elektra, but we certainly do not go into as much detail as per our usual content. This is the first episode of Recent Reels. Enjoy.
So, what are you seeing recently there, Brian? Anything good in your letterbox diary there?
Let me refer to my old letterbox diary and see what highlights we have here.
What did we do before Letterboxd?
I honestly don't know, man. I assume I would have forgotten about so many movies I've seen. It would really have to take a stellar movie to stand out of my mind.
I guess so.
As something to mark as watched, So on this past week, I watched a movie called The Red Queen Kills 7 Times.
What? Never heard of it.
So this is a 1972 murder mystery film from Italy.
Is it? I was gonna say, is it Giallo?
You know what? I'm not sure this is Giallo or not. There is some violent deaths in here. I'm not fully up to speed on the specific genres, but I guess this could be a Giallo film.
But you love your Giallo films, right?
Yeah, and basically because of falling in love with the Arrow movie releases. Nice. This is a boutique Blu-ray company, kind of like Criterion. They release these old films, quite often foreign films, and this one, yeah, definitely stood out to me as what I need to watch. I checked it out. It was on sale on iTunes recently, so I actually bought it as a blind buy. It was $2.99. The sales are sometimes too killer to pass up. But basically, The Red Queen Kills 7 Times is about two sisters whose family owns this castle in Italy. And there's a legend in the castle where every 100 years, there's a red queen and a black queen. They're always sisters, and they're not officially queens. That's just kind of what they're called, I guess. Although I guess historically they may have actually been queens. In this situation, the movie is actually taking place in 1972, and they're just family members. They're just two sisters. So the legend that I don't know if it's a grandfather who owns the castle at the moment, he's telling them the black queen ends up killing the red queen, and then the red queen comes back to life and kills 6 different people, and the 7th kill is her sister, the black queen. So the movie is playing out as a murder mystery. I mean, realistically, you're watching and you're thinking, all right, nobody's actually being raised from the dead, or are they? Right? So it satisfies that Giallo kill count. There's, murders every so often.
Graphic kill count too, right?
They're graphic. Maybe not by today's standards, but, at the time, they're graphic. There's lots of blood. And it's always a bit you never get to see the killer who's doing it at the time, right? And then it all just kind of coalesces at the end where you find out who the killer is. You find out their motivations, all that fun stuff. But the movie had me entranced throughout the entire runtime. It was awesome. Why don't you go next and tell me what have you been watching?
Okay, so upon your recommendation, I finally checked out the New Mutants.
What'd you think of that?
It was it wasn't great. I'm gonna be honest. It was a terrible way to end out the Fox era of the X-Men franchise. I mean, the story and the plotting didn't make a whole lot of sense. It wasn't great. The big reveal at the end was that she fought a giant demon bear.
Bear.
There was also quite a bit of teen shower scenes, which I kind of felt uncomfortable. It's there was a lot more teen girls showering naked together than I probably would have felt comfortable with watching. Although the one good thing about this movie was showing an LGBTQ relationship.
Yes,
between the two lesbian girls there. So that was actually a positive where they threw it in there. It wasn't a big thing. It's oh my god, they were lesbians. It's no, they were two people and they fell in love.
Yeah.
But also a lot, probably more teen lesbian making out than I felt comfortable with. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe just as an adult watching teens make out, it's just not comfortable anymore.
Well, and that's the thing. This is kind of like a movie aimed at teenagers, right?
It is.
I did feel a little strange. I'm glad you mentioned that. As a 40-year-old man, I knew I was not the target audience of this film. But since it is, in the X-Men universe, it's a Marvel superhero film, I felt obligated to watch it. And it was the last Fox Marvel property, right?
Yeah, and it went out with a whimper, unfortunately. It wasn't great. Like, all these new mutants, and they were being held in this facility against their will because they were potentially dangerous by one employee working for the Essex Corporation, which if you don't read the comics, you have no idea what the hell that means, and there's no hint given to it.
Yeah.
And you look at, like, even the in-world rules don't even make sense. Like, the one girl, like the doctor keeping them there can make force fields, but the one girl's ability is she can teleport. So it's like, well, this doesn't even make sense with the rules you've created. And then all of a sudden people's fears kept being brought to life. And I was like, oh, I wonder what this is. Could it be the new girl who just showed up?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I wonder what's happening. It was just, yeah, it was pretty bad.
I did appreciate that they went for it, though. Like, I appreciated that it was sort of a different genre than your normal superhero film.
When they kept saying that there was going to be like a lot more like blended like horror movie into the comic book movie genres and that kind of cross-pollination, it wasn't actually super scary.
No.
Until the very end, and even then it was more kind of action horror where they had those like that one character, Anya Taylor-Joy's character, there's these like weird like stretched out tall dudes like without eyeballs, and they were really kind of freaky, slow moving.
Yeah.
They were kind of freaky, or they would have been, except it was all played for action instead of horror, where they're trying to run away from them. It would have been cool if like the lights started to go out and you just saw them kind of in shadow and like creeping along. But it was like a bunch of guys. It was an action movie instead of horror movie.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder how much of that was lost. Like, this movie was in production turmoil for a long time. Obviously, it came out last year, but I think it was done 2 or 3 years ago. Did it have more traditional horror elements, or was it because this is like a young adult film and its horror is going to be, geared towards a little more in the safe area? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sort of, but it still sucked.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I was surprised by its quality. I think I ended up giving that one 3 stars, although it probably doesn't deserve 3 stars.
I gave it 2, and it was 1.5.
That seems more reasonable.
I couldn't deduct stars for like the actors as usual. Most of them, like Anya Taylor-Joy and was it Macy Williams? Obviously,
they did a good job.
They're good, and that dude from Stranger Things. I apologize, I can't remember his name, but he did a good job as always. And the doctor too. She's in a bunch of stuff, and I cannot remember her name for the life of me.
You know what? And I've seen her in a couple more movies since New Mutants, and I can never remember her name. I ended up looking her up all the time, and she's been in a lot of stuff. And that's the thing. Like, this movie had a lot of good names. It has like a lot of good talent in it.
Yeah, it was really, really good. It was the writing and the plotting. Like, the special effects are fine. They're great. But then it's like, oh yeah, she fights a bear. And it's like that. It's almost like that. The saying is like, like you got 2 bears inside of you, and like one is like fear and one is love. And like, which one's going to win? It's like whichever one you feed, which is, I don't know. They said it was an old indigenous or Aboriginal saying, and it might be. But it's also been kind of co-opted. You see this exact kind of thing you see on like a motivational poster, at somebody's work with a cat hanging from the branch or something,
Yeah,
it's like it's become so cliched now, and like that was as deep as the philosophy went in the movie. It was really kind of as opposed to like the first couple where it's like making direct links to the Holocaust and direct links to discrimination against LGBTQ people, and making those broader social links, even in the midst of those summer blockbuster hero movies. And you look at this one, and it's like, oh yeah, don't be afraid. Yeah.
So, as bad as the movie was it as bad as the previous couple of X-Men films? Like, would you have preferred it to end on, what was the last one? Apocalypse?
No,
there was one other
Dark
one.
Phoenix.
Phoenix, yes.
I still have to see that one. I'm going to watch that one tonight, I think. But
You have
Apocalypse was a pile of trash. So this was better than Apocalypse, but that's not saying anything really.
No.
I mean, like, all due respect to the filmmakers and the actors and screenwriters and key grips and whatnot involved in the film, but the film was garbage. Like, Apocalypse was just so stupid.
It kind of makes me a little disappointed because they at least had the foresight here to introduce new characters, and they did set up a bit of not a cliffhanger, but they did set up the rest of the world that, we're going to be exploring more movies with these new mutants, and we're going to get away from the traditional Cyclops, Professor X thing, right? And, after seeing those guys around for 20 years, I'm ready for something new, but obviously it is where it is now, and we're going to be getting an MCU X-Men situation in probably 5 or 10 years.
I don't want no mutants. I want 10 more movies of Wolverine.
Right? Just more Wolverine movies, please.
I'm only half joking. Wolverine's one of my favorite characters, so. But yeah, you're right. It was refreshing to get some different characters, but I think a lot of comments online that I was reading, a lot of people felt like the New Mutants, it felt like almost the first episode of a TV show, because so it was basically just introducing the characters and nothing really happened, and was setting up what was going to happen in a series. So many people have said that, and then looking back at it, it's like, maybe that's how it started. Maybe that was the intent, and it grew out of that. It's like, well, we're not going to get the green light to make an entire series, but maybe we'll take the pilot episode and try to make that into a movie. Who knows what goes on in back rooms?
Well, that's the issue with how they make movies now, is they need to make a franchise. They're not happy to make a single film, and maybe a lot of it is, I'm thinking of like these failure movies like Mortal Engines, where it's clearly meant to be a series. And to be fair, I'm not on top of my young adult literature, where I assume a lot of this stuff comes from, to know if there's a whole book series behind it. But when the first movie doesn't do well, everyone who loves this world building stuff, you're so disappointed. I'm thinking of Jupiter Ascending as well, where it's clearly setting up a whole world and we get nothing afterwards.
Well, you look at stuff like Artemis Fowl as well, which is a complete and utter failure, and there was a couple other ones, but the problem is they're not making these movies. The studios and filmmakers aren't making these movies because they believe in the property and because they really like the world. They're doing it because they want to replicate the success of Harry Potter and Twilight, right? It's all, the problem is it's coming at it from, I know it's show business, but they're coming at it completely from the business aspect, and I think that shows when you don't have that same passion. Where you look at somebody like Peter Jackson making Lord of the Rings, you could see the passion that Peter Jackson brought, but that the studio had for this project, and that the whole cast and crew had, right? You can that comes through, right? Whereas opposed, if you're just making this for money, which I'm not saying that the Lord of the Rings wasn't made for money, because obviously they wanted to turn a profit. But if you're just making it purely for, here's a people loved Harry Potter, let's take Harry Potter and put it in the future on giant moving cities.
Yeah, well, it's a thing, like talking about Lord of the Rings, there's a bunch of business people, the studio, who are willing to back a group of artists, or like Peter Jackson, into their passion. And now I think 20 years later, we're in a environment where they're, like exactly as you said, they're not really interested in supporting the art. They want the business side of it more so.
Well, that's why I'm super stoked for Denis Villeneuve's Dune.
Yeah.
Which is because of the delays due to COVID. I'm pretty sure we're not going to see sequel to this, which is really going to suck, because I think this movie only covers. I don't know if you've read the Dune novels at all.
I have not read them. No.
I started reading them in anticipation of this movie, but the first movie, there's kind of like a natural break in it. Not quite halfway through, but about 2/3 of the way through, there's kind of a natural break in the narrative, where there's like a 5-year kind of gap. And I think the movie only covers that first novel up until that break. So the first movie doesn't even cover the entire first novel, because I think they were anticipating, without the global pandemic, this movie coming out, getting that positive buzz and leading into making the sequels, right? Yeah. Which in this case really makes sense. But like, you could tell, like, a filmmaker like Denis Villeneuve, who's really passionate about filmmaking, who puts so much care into filmmaking, who chooses projects so carefully. Yeah. That it's really I'm really disappointed already that I'm not disappointed, but I'm really kind of worried that we're not going to get his full vision for the Dune universe, and we're going to get stuck with that one movie for reasons beyond his control.
Well, 100%. I mean, obviously the pandemic, and to be honest with you, audiences are not supporting these kind of films anymore.
Yeah.
Like Blade Runner, I mean, we're talking about Villeneuve. Blade Runner 2049 did not necessarily do very well at the box office.
Oh,
right?
it tanked at box offices.
Right? I sort of picture Dune being in the same situation. This looks like a pretty high-end production, and it needs a lot of money to break even, and to support a whole series going forward is going to be a tough sell right from the very beginning. Just the fact that the studio took the risk to create this one film is speaking volumes to their faith in Villeneuve. But like you said, the pandemic and pushing things back, theaters are not going to be the same when it does open up again. And of course, Warner has decided to release things on streaming anyways. So we're not going to have an accurate box office regardless. Might just end up dooming that entire series.
But speaking of movies that are not going to have their series completed, I also recently watched Alita Battle Angel.
Oh, man. Yes.
And, oh, man, I was so torn because I love Robert Rodriguez and I love his filmography. Not so much, I don't really love the Spy Kids films, but I love the fact that he made them and it felt comfortable enough that he just goes out and does what he loves and is like, I'm going to make some movies for my kids and for other kids. Yeah. And then he goes and does something like, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, really like violent and over the top and crazy. So Alita Battle Angel, I haven't read the manga at all, so I don't know the whole backstory. I know that this has been a passion project of James Cameron for a while. I think he produced the movie, and I think his series back in the day, I don't know if you remember Dark Angel with Jessica Alba.
I've never seen it though.
I think it took heavy inspiration from Alita Battle Angel. But the movie itself was so tough because there was so much to love in there. There was so much great stuff, and every so often you see this moment of greatness peek through, and then they would just go back to some of the actors I think were a little bit miscast. Like I think her main love interest there was just so bland.
That character was probably the worst offender. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the actor or if it's just that he was in the wrong role. It's like he didn't have the charisma, and the chemistry between the main actress who played Alita. But there were some really, really cool fights. It was a really interesting world to build up in, but it really felt like that whole ending where she didn't get up to that city in the sky, and then you see Edward Norton take his glasses off at the end, and there's like they're kind of looking at each other even though they can't see each other. Yeah. With a promise of like we're gonna start this revolution between the lower classes and the upper classes, and because it did so poorly at the box office, we're never gonna see those movies, which might have turned out to be a lot better. I think this movie, I think for me, kind of failed overall. I think I gave it like a 2 or 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I really appreciate that the risk was taken and that filmmakers like Robert Rodriguez can go in and make these wild, fantastical films, and being given that chance to fail, even if it comes out that's not perfect, I still appreciate that he took that opportunity and gave it a shot like that.
Well, maybe since James Cameron, like he produced the movie, maybe if it's a passion project of his, once all that sweet Avatar sequel money comes in, he'll just greenlight the next couple of Alita movies, and we'll get some nice entries of that series. Alita, I saw that in theaters when it first came out. I wasn't blown away by it, but I do agree with pretty much everything you said. I can appreciate what they're building up, and I think there's some fun moments in there. There's some really questionable stuff in there for me. But I ended up seeing this again in the theater last summer.
Okay.
When the pandemic was pretty much at an all-time low in my area, and they were re-releasing Alita to theaters almost, as my friend was telling me, as a sort of a test to see how a possible sequel might be, like see if there's any interest in it. I don't know how the re-release went. Obviously, we're still in pandemic. You can't expect that much out of it. But he was pretty adamant that we should go support this movie because he really enjoyed it. And it's like, yeah, let's go check this out on IMAX. And watching it again, I had the exact same feelings about it. It was a lot of fun to see it on screen, but there were some weird things going on there, but I just couldn't get behind.
Yeah, it was so close to being a solid film, so close to being even a great film, but there was just a lot of questionable elements in there. But the one thing they did, like the special effects were pretty amazing, like the way they blended the live action and the CG characters together. Like that was like it's getting uncanny now how well they could do this.
Yeah, that was really wild, to be honest with you. It was pretty neat. What did you rate Alita?
I have it. I'm looking at it now, and I rated it 2.5 stars. So I didn't.
That's respectable.
I didn't hate it, but I can't. It's not a great film, but I'm glad that it exists.
I ended up giving that film 3 stars. I'm not sure if I rated it lower on my first viewing or not, but to be frank with you, sometimes 3 stars is my safe rating, where I'm really undecided on the film, or I'm kind of indifferent to it. It's not a 50% film. It deserves a little more than that, just for the production and you can see some passion behind it, but honestly, I could see that going either way.
Yeah.
Another series that I've been jumping into is the Tremors series.
What do you mean? There was one movie,
right? That's what you would think.
No, there's only one movie. It ends there.
And so
it does end
they
there.
released recently the first Tremors, which I think was 1989 or 1990, on 4K. And of course, I bought it the moment it was announced because I have to have it. Loved Tremors when I was a kid, and I still love it today. It was fantastic. Like Kevin Bacon, and is it
Fred Ward?
Fred Ward, yeah.
Everybody always forgets Fred Ward's name, but no, not today, sir. Fred Ward, we've got your back.
Yeah. I couldn't I knew it was Ward. I couldn't remember I had Burt Ward on my mind for some reason. Like, I think that's somebody else.
That's Robin in the original Batman series.
So after watching Tremors, I was like, you know what? I have to get all the other Tremors movies. I think they're up to number 7 now.
Yeah, was that one Cold Day in Hell?
I couldn't even tell you. But I've really been enjoying watching different series. Like last year, I did Resident Evil. I did the Underworld series, which I'm still posting the reviews on our website for. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for Tremors. I'm taking a couple more weeks between each entry of the film, though. So I finally hit Tremors 4. And I could just go over some of the first few Tremors here, where the second one was the most...
Is that the one where they're flying?
Second one no, they are not flying yet. That's number 3.
This third one was like the blasters, I guess they call them, or something.
Oh my god, the blasters! Don't even get me started. I cannot believe they're called that. But the second one stands out because there's like a town or like an oil rig in Mexico that has a bunch of tremors attacking people. So they call up Fred Ward from the first film and just like, well, you're an expert on tremors, so can you come down and get these guys for us? There were a lot of little elements that I really liked. But one of the worst things is that they come down, he has a sidekick, which is a really poor Kevin Bacon knockoff character, and no disrespect to the actor here. But they have a bunch of American people show up, and all the Mexican workers and characters die. Not a single American character dies in the film. And maybe that's some kind of spoiler. But I was like, I cannot believe they went to Mexico and just killed all the Mexican people. And I think that movie was like 92 or 93. Maybe it wasn't like on the conscience of people, or if that's just how it turned out. Because they brought back... is it Michael Gross?
Yeah, didn't Michael Gross essentially take over that series as kind of like the main lead?
Yeah. So Michael Gross comes back, and it's like okay, well, I understand.
In one of the entries, doesn't he play like his own ancestor, like his own great grandfather or something?
So that's number 4.
It's like the Old West, right? The Tremors.
Yeah,
that's number 4. Okay.
So number 2 introduces smaller tremors, like bipedal tremors. They have 2 legs, and they're dangerous.
Actually, I think in the context of the movies, they're all called graboids.
They are called graboids. You're right. In number 3, we're back in Perfection, which is the town from the original place. It's literally advanced like 15, 20 years from the original events. And we get flying tremors, which are now called blasters. That I couldn't stop laughing when that was happening, but also shaking my head. It's like this. If the series is going to get into this quality, I'm not looking forward to the remaining 4 films. Tremors 4 I watched a couple weekends ago, and that takes place about 100 years in the past when the town of Perfection was called Rejection, I think. And it's basically like a mine nearby that is being terrorized by some tremors, and we're basically going back to the basics of just regular tremors showing up and wreaking havoc in the Old West. So they have all their old guns, and Michael Gross is playing his own ancestor, who is basically fighting off these things. And there's some good moments in there. It was a much better film than number 3.
Yeah, I seem to recall that was number 4 was a solid one there, the Old West one.
And I'm with number 4 now. I'm kind of looking forward to the next few, but I know that it might go downhill pretty quickly. So Tremors 4 came out in 2004, and I think Tremors 7 came out in like 2017 or something.
Oh, they ramped up the production, yeah. Also, the important question though is Reba McEntire still in these movies?
No, she did not make any return, and it's kind of brutal because obviously Michael Gross comes back and he's married to Reba McEntire in the movie. She doesn't come back. She's not even mentioned in the second movie, and the third one where they're back home, I don't know if they make mention of it, but she's just completely MIA.
Not even like an off-screen death or anything?
No, nothing like that. Man, these special effects take such a downward spiral into number 3. Like there's some stop motion or like puppetry in the second one for the graboids, which is pretty decent, and then the budget just falls through the floor for the number 3, and they try to have CGI flying tremors that are just it's pretty rough.
Well, the first one's pretty amazing in terms of the special effects. I don't know if you've watched the special features on the Arrow edition, if they have the special effects breakdowns, but like seeing how they did like the forced perspective for some scenes to make these things look bigger, and to see like how these things were like the graboids or the tremors were created for real as puppets, and they look so great.
Yeah, they're really well done there. What else has been on? What else have you been checking out lately?
Okay, so I checked out, as part of my ongoing series of kind of news/media films, investigative reporting films, I watched Frost Nixon.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which was a solid film, directed by Ron Howard. Again, based on a true story about this interviewer who interviewed, who faced off against I was going to call him Robert Nixon, against Richard Nixon in a series of interviews touching on his presidency, everything from, was it Vietnam to the Watergate scandal.
Yeah.
And it was kind of this back and forth, which it was kind of interesting, but I don't know.
So is the entire movie just interviews, like between these two characters?
No, most of the movie is kind of, or the first half of the movie is essentially setting up the character of...
Is that Michael Sheen plays David Frost?
David Frost, yeah. Michael Sheen playing David Frost. Michael Sheen, again, great actor. I think Michael Sheen's overlooked a lot, but I think he's having a kind of a renaissance as well now, where he's becoming...
he's doing great things.
Yeah, he's doing great things, and you should, anything with Michael Sheen, check this guy out. He does great stuff. But yeah, just watching David Frost and how it came to be, and how he was trying to get funding for it because none of the major networks would take this, and how he was kind of looked down upon as a game show host, but he was also a producer, a big Hollywood producer, producing movies and kind of balancing this out. He was paired with some people who really were like, they were political activists essentially, and they cared a lot about kind of shining a light on Nixon and the evils that he did. And David Frost was portrayed in the movie anyway as more kind of financially motivated and career motivated. But then in the end, I think it was like the final interview in the movie anyway, where he really, lights a fire under Nixon and gets him to the point to basically where he's like apologizing for Watergate, or was it Vietnam or something like that, right?
Okay, interesting.
Where they're pairing off and they're kind of like, it was almost filmed. It was interesting. It was filmed almost like a boxing movie. It was almost filmed like a sporting movie. We had like, even when they went to their kind of quote unquote corners. We had like their coaches coaching them. It was even the way it was framed. It was almost like a boxing movie or a sparring match, right? It was really interesting the way it was framed.
Yeah, you could almost see that in the title of the movie, Frost/Nixon. Like, is an actual slash there? With you saying that, they could have easily just replaced that Frost v. Nixon, right?
Yeah, well, it's almost like you're saying it. Like it could almost be like a marquee for like Muhammad Ali versus whatever famous boxer that he fought that I can't remember right now. Oh, George Foreman. Like Muhammad Ali / George Foreman, and it could be So it's almost it was a smart way to do it, but I'm not quite sure why it won so many awards during that award season. Maybe it was a slow year. No offense to the movie. It was a good movie, but I don't think it was like Oscar worthy.
Yeah, so that was 2008.
2008? Wasn't that when The Dark Knight came out?
That is exactly it. So maybe it was overshadowed. What won Best Picture in 2008? I'm just looking at the Letterboxd most popular in 2008, and it's not going to tell me what Best Picture is. It's like obviously Dark Knight, Wall-E, Iron Man, Benjamin Button came out in 2008 as well. Slumdog Millionaire would have won Best Picture, right?
Did it, or was it No Country for Old Men?
I wish Letterboxd would just tell you. I know there's like the IMDb would probably be a better resource for telling you what awards movies have won.
But either way, I don't know why Frost Nixon was up there. It was a solid Ron Howard film, but it wasn't like to Apollo 13 levels.
Yeah, and Ron Howard, there's a director I don't think about too much anymore. I'm not sure he's doing a whole lot of really big noteworthy movies like he was in the 90s. So
I checked out there was a movie recently. It wasn't released recently, but I saw in the past couple months called The Missing.
Okay.
Directed by Ron Howard, starring Kate Blanchett and Tommy Lee Jones. A kind of Western movie, really. Mm-hmm. But it was really good, and I looked at the cover and I was like, oh, it's directed by Ron Howard. Yeah, Ron Howard, I think, is one of those filmmakers who I don't think he's necessarily an auteur filmmaker. I think he's a great he's like a journeyman filmmaker, right? He's like you have a film and you want to get it made really well, you call in Ron Howard. And sometimes he's going to knock it out of the park, but most of the time you're just going to get like a decently made film. Yeah. Right? Like there's just like a certain bar, you're just a certain level of quality. You call in Ron Howard, you're not going to go below that bar, but you're not guaranteed to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
But when he does knock it out of the park, like Apollo 13, it's knocked out of the park.
Well, I will be sure to add Frost Nixon to my watch list here. On Letterboxd, it has an average rating of 3.6, which I think speaks pretty well to the film's quality.
Yeah, I have it at 3.5.
You're right in line there. So I went to the theater a couple weeks ago.
Just to be clear, your city is in the green zone.
We are definitely authorized. In the green. Yeah, we are authorized to go to the theater.
Just in case we get some angry feedback here for...
Well, and I wrote about this in my Inception 10th anniversary post from last summer. Where going to the theater was really legitimately terrifying. And going in to see Inception, I think we went on like a Sunday or Saturday afternoon. Not necessarily the smartest thing to do, but going in there, I felt very, very safe with all the cleaning protocols that they do. And honestly, just that there's only 2 other people in the theater with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're sort of in the same situation here where our theaters have opened up. We have, well, at the time we had next to no cases in the city. It is nice that I can check out the seating charts to see how busy it is. And I went on a Tuesday night to see Judas and the Black Messiah.
Oh, how was that?
Really damn good. It was really good. And there was, 3 other people in the theater with me? And it was nice because it's a big screen. 3 people sitting way up at the front. I'm sitting by myself at the back. I could really get used to watching movies in that way. And it's like I do not look forward to, sold out theaters again where every seat is taken. But Judas and the Black Messiah was really fantastic. And I felt it was kind of important to go see this movie in the theater. This is one that came out, I think, on video on demand or like HBO Max at the same time as its theatrical release recently. But being in a safe area is like I have to get out to the theater to see this. I don't often go check out dramas in the theater. And this was just a really solid movie. And it's about a subject matter that I really know very little about, which really motivated me to go watch it properly without distractions. So yeah, it's essentially about Fred Hampton, a member of the Black Panther Party, and I guess this is a piece of history that they are definitely not teaching us in school, especially up here in Canada. And I feel like all my knowledge of the Black Panther stuff might come from stereotypes in earlier cinema, and I'm thinking back to like the scene in Forrest Gump where Jenny is with like a Black Panther meeting, or they're in some scenario and there's like a heightened sense of danger, but as a kid I didn't really know what this group was or what was going on, and being able to see this and get some more insight into it was just, I mean, it's rage inducing, right? Because the systemic racism that the US and like different places are embroiled in. And this one was essentially about J. Edgar Hoover's like crusade against the Black Panthers, and specifically Fred Hampton's assassination. But it's told from a different perspective, which I think the movie doesn't really benefit from. So it's from the perspective of Bill O'Neill, who was basically an undercover informant for the FBI, where he was kind of being blackmailed to go spy on the Black Panthers, like the local chapter,
right?
And by extension, Hampton. But the movie is all from his perspective, so we don't really get it's not like a biopic about Hampton. We don't get to see everything he's doing. We get to see a slice of it through Bill O'Neill's perspective, which is still interesting. There's some really good stuff going on in here. It was frustrating to watch and like understand that these events were happening, and then doing some research afterwards. I'm just shaking my head like I have no words for it, right? But an important piece of history here that is told through a very competently made film.
Yeah, it sounds structurally almost like The Last King of Scotland, where it's talking about this historical figure told through the lens of somebody kind of close by, but not the actual historical figure himself, or from his point of view. But yeah, the Black Panther movement is definitely not something that's taught, I don't think, in American schools, but definitely not touched on. That period in American history is not really touched on a whole lot in the core curriculum in Canada. But looking at the Black Panthers, a lot of what I know about them comes from the movies. But obviously the real life Black Panther movement was a lot more complex and nuanced. I think it was originally started specifically as a counter movement to police brutality against black people. And obviously, usually what we get in films is like the more extremist versions of elements who are pushing back with violence. But then you don't see why they were formed to begin with, and how that cycle of violence was perpetuated by the existing system and the police forces and the crackdown on war on drugs and the systematic racism. So I think, you hear Black Panther in movies, and that's code for, violent thugs. And even the term thug, is used historically as a racist dog whistle to mean black people, right? Especially in the Nixon era and like the 60s and 70s. So I think you're right. I've been looking forward to this movie, actually. I saw it and I wanted to check it out. But it's good to, I think we're in an era now where we're getting a wider variety of movies telling a wider variety, or getting a wider cross section of these different cultural elements and different aspects of these cultures, made from the perspective of these different groups of different intersectional identities. And so we're learning more about Black history, learning more about Aboriginal history. And I think this is overall, I'm learning more about like LGBTQ history, and I think this is one of the ways in which art acts could be a very powerful, positive influence on society.
Judas and the Black Messiah, it doesn't stray away from idolizing these characters either. It does show, the violence that goes on both sides of it. And like you sort of hinted at there, the complexity of the organization, but also the political climate and individual situations, right? The film will depict how a seemingly like innocent situation can escalate because of the situations these people are in, basically. It was just really good, and definitely worth everyone's time. The acting in it is really good. I think Daniel Kaluuya won a Golden Globe for Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor in the film.
Oh, awesome! That guy's a great actor.
He's fantastic. It was really fantastic all around. Definitely worth your time.
How would you rank it up there with The Five Bloods?
The Five Bloods. I mean, I got a lot more out of this one than I did with the Five Bloods.
I know it's very different subject matter, but I think it's touching a lot on a lot of the same themes in a different way in terms of that systematic racism, and also I don't know. I'm assuming, maybe I shouldn't assume, that it was made by a black filmmaker as well.
Yes, Shaka King.
Right. Why do I know that name?
I'm looking at his filmography here on Letterboxd. I don't recognize. There's basically 3 or 4 films here I don't recognize, but so I'd probably put that film at 4.5 stars.
Nice.
You got time for one more film here?
Sure. So on the other end of the spectrum, after we did our first episode of the podcast, and we were talking about some of the lesser films in the superhero genre, and I think we mentioned Elektra, and I realized I had never seen the whole movie. I'd seen bits and pieces here and there, and so I decided finally to sit down and watch the whole thing.
Oh man!
Partially also because my son is big into superheroes right now, and we recently watched that was it the 2003 Ben Affleck's Daredevil movie back in the day, from which Elektra was spun off. And so we actually sat down on a Friday night. It was last Friday, and we watched Elektra, and it was not that great a movie. It was that movie definitely did not deserve Jennifer Garner. She was giving it her all. This is the really frustrating part, because Jennifer Garner, took this character Elektra, who was kind of one note in Daredevil, and made her really nuanced, and she was this dark, brooding character, and it seemed like she had weight to her, and she gave this there were some emotional moments where she was acting the heck out of this movie, and it didn't deserve her, especially when one of the climactic fights was with a pile of laundry floating around the room. I was the movie itself was pretty nonsensical, and you had bad guys like Tattoo Man and Big Strong Man, whose only weakness is a tree, and Bad Breath Lady. I mean, it seemed like they literally just threw this movie together with a bunch of Mad Libs, put in just random elements here and there. But Jennifer Garner did a really great job. The rest of the movie was pretty nonsensical. It was pretty brutal.
And that final scene there with the sheets, were the sheets possessed, or I don't think the sheets were actually doing anything. They just, it's like the villain by chance threw them all up in the air, and they continue to fall in this hall that they're fighting in for a good 5 minutes.
He was using magic to animate them to obstruct her view. This magical man who didn't age, who ended up killing her parents, or ended up being the one who killed her parents. It was just the whole thing was. The only other good part was they had Stick in there.
Yeah,
I really wished. I know it was the time before they had cinematic universes, but if they would have just especially since they had the Stick character who was big in the Daredevil comics, just throw out the name. He's Matt was worried about you, or what are you gonna tell Matt? You don't even have to use the word Daredevil, but it's talk about Matt and Murdoch. Yeah. Just acknowledge it exists. And it would have made a lot more sense. I can see why they didn't get the whole series out of that.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, because looking into it afterwards, all those weird kind of generic villains you encountered were all characters and villains from the comic books, and it kind of seemed like one of those things where they just wanted to fit in. Yeah, and it's...
You're kidding me. You tell me that Tattoo Man was actually...
You know what? I don't know all the details of who
character. It was. Because that guy was ridiculous. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that the movie doesn't handle its characters very well, right? So those might have been legit villains, or they might have been D-tier villains of the comics. I'm not sure. But they basically just fit them into this super villain team and dispatched of them pretty easily, right? Without much ceremony. I think she was fighting the one woman in the villain group, which I think was a sort of a compelling battle at the end. That was post-sheet battle.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about bad breath lady.
I think so.
Yeah, which
I don't know what she did though.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like Elektra's power set seemed really undefined. Like sometimes she could like seemingly teleport.
Yeah.
And other times, like her other ability was like she was immortal now or something, or she could just be resurrected, which is like I'm not sure. I know in the comics there's a whole storyline about Elektra being resurrected.
Yeah.
But this one it seemed like she just had that power, where it's like she just like can't die anymore. It was really really weird, but they just didn't define it at all. Or was it super speed? It's like or just like generic ninja powers. Like,
well, that was the thing, and. Going back to what you said about like the shared multiverse here, where they won't come out and really say it, but like she died in Daredevil and now she's back, and they won't really address that she's back from the dead, like what happened to her. She basically was just living alone. She was trying to mind her own business in some lake town.
Well, she was a gun for hire. She was an assassin for hire.
Yeah.
So she was going around killing people, and so
she was still active. She was doing her thing. Was this after Daredevil?
It was after Daredevil because she had the scar. At one point, she had to take off her shirt because obviously, obviously they had to make the female character take off her shirt. But she had like the scar where she was stabbed by Bullseye, aka, is it Colin Farrell? Yeah, Colin Farrell. Right?
Yeah. So Ben Affleck's Daredevil does not know that Elektra was alive, and she wasn't just alive; she was actively working on contracts. Is that right?
Yeah, she was, because she had earlier in the movie, like she was cleaning up a crime scene from where she had murdered a bunch of people after taking money. So she's like, I don't even know if it's morally gray at that point. She's just straight up murdering people for money.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been. I know that back in the day, it was probably. They weren't building up to a shared universe yet. That concept didn't really exist. And maybe it was like money. They couldn't have Ben Affleck actually turn up because maybe it was money or contractual issues or whatever it was. But like, just give a shout out to the name or show like a newspaper clipping of the Daredevil. And it's like, and she's looking at it wistfully.
Well, I think your suggestion there would be having Stick say, "Oh, Matt's worried about you," would be the perfect way to tie it in. Without name dropping Daredevil, you say Matt, you're talking about Murdoch, and they're connected still, and it doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yeah, even something simple like that, because like the Stick character really connects both those characters, and maybe it was an issue of, again, somebody making this film who wasn't familiar with the source material. And I'm not by any means an expert on the Daredevil comics, but even I, as a casual fan, like I'm aware of these connections, and I'm aware of like certain storylines with these characters and what their actual power sets are. And like I don't recall her having that extent of supernatural powers in the comics at any time. She was always just supposed to be like essentially like Matt Murdock. She was a ninja, right? She didn't have like resurrection powers or magical powers for most of the time anyway.
Yeah, that's something. I'm just reading on Letterboxd not the synopsis, kind of like the brief description where it says Elektra the warrior survives a near-death experience, becomes an assassin for hire, and tries to protect her two latest targets, a single father and his young daughter, from a group of supernatural assassins. So I guess it would stand to reason that if the assassins are going to be supernatural, then they probably want to make her a little supernatural as well.
Well, she essentially had to be to beat these guys, because they were all held super powers, and she really couldn't have beaten them without some kind of superpowers. So they just gave her ambiguous.
Did the father's daughter have any kind of powers? She was turned into something?
Yeah, that was the whole thing. Because they kept talking about like the hand and the Stick's good group of ninjas. They were after, what was it, the treasure, I think they called it, which was essentially a person who was just like the most awesomest fighter ever. It was gonna like help turn the tide of battle. It was like an ancient ongoing battle between these two groups. And I think you were supposed to think throughout the whole film that it was Elektra they were talking about. She was the chosen one.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And it turns out it's this girl that she's supposed to protect, and she has these magical beads, which I'm not gonna make any off-color jokes about beads because this is a family broadcast.
Yes.
But it was really weird. Where it's like, oh yeah, these beads glow, and I can hit people with them and cut them in half or something. It was, And she's like, her powers were kind of undefined too. It was like, I'm great at martial arts and I can kick people really hard. But then she comes against somebody with actual superpowers and she fails miserably. And Elektra saves the day. So I was like, I don't know how this girl was the chosen one. It was really weird.
Some strange decisions made in that movie, and I wonder if they had any plans for future Elektra movies or even Daredevil ones. But the combination of Daredevil and Elektra, they were only 2 years apart, just basically killed that entire series of films for moviegoers. But we wouldn't go back to it until the Netflix Daredevil series, which I felt like did Elektra a lot better.
Oh yeah, Charlie Cox is the main character, Matt Murdock / Daredevil, and then Elektra, played by Elodie Young in that series, and she does a great job. They finally did that character right in that show, where I think for the Defenders crossover, which was how shall I say it politely, not quite up to snuff.
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
She is brought back from the dead in that one, so they have the same storyline, and it just showed like she doesn't have crazy supernatural powers. She's just like, essentially she's just like a super great fighter. She's got super strength, I think, and super, like, not super speed like the Flash, but she's more agile and she's strong.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there was a very grounded sense of powers in the Daredevil series, to a point where Daredevil may not even have any powers himself. You know, he has super hearing, okay, but they're not borderlining on, you know, like the spider sense or something, right? And he doesn't necessarily have super strength. He's just a really good fighter, and they keep showing you he gets injured. Yeah. People in those shows get injured. Like, it's grounded and realistic, and just makes it all that much better.
Well, I think his superior physicality is just kind of hinted at, where he's constantly getting beaten up, but then the next day he's kind of fine, which in other movies or shows kind of wouldn't make sense. But in this show, maybe that's part of the physicality, why he's able to go so long and have those giant one-take fights with bad guys in hallways and stairwells, is because he has that slightly elevated kind of superhuman stamina, not quite to Captain America levels, but maybe to maybe Black Widow levels. I think Black Widow is hinted at as being like a super soldier light in the MCU.
Yeah, that's something in the movies I don't feel like they'd really talk about very much, is why not give her a little bit of power, right? Just like Hawkeye, you almost have to give these characters some elevated powers above your average person, or even your super average person.
Yeah, I feel they did that with Black Widow, where it shows her in like some kind of super soldier training program. So it's like, okay, maybe they obviously, she's a bit more than human, but she's not quite superhuman. I think she's in that gray area where it's obviously she's got super reflexes, super speed, super strength. Not to the extent that somebody like Captain America, who's obviously enhanced, does, but she's better than like a human being.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe we'll get some more answers in the Black Widow movie coming out in May, I think, unless it gets pushed back again.
Once again, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Real Film Chronicles. You can find us online at realfilmchronicles.com.
Yeah, really looking forward to the next time, and thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys later, and stay safe out there.